Do 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 do. Hey, I guess you notice there's a different screen here. Honestly, I was getting tired of that iMac. It's not the one that I work on all day long in the back room. It's just getting so slow. I can actually put it back again, but it was just becoming so unbearable to me. And it was extremely obtrusive. It had a regular spinning hard drive in it. It was just so unbearable. You're like, what happened to the big iMac screen? Like, yeah, I couldn't take it anymore. If you want me to bring it back, just let me know. Yeah, it's just unbearable. Also, too, I do the live streams now in this room, and it'll make it easier for just flipping the laptop around and doing the live streams from here. That I can't even begin to tell you how much misery that slow old iMac. I didn't use it for really anything anymore. It's just unbearably slow. Man, I had one rough day today. I don't know about you, but my day was rough. It's not the kind of day that I'd like to revisit. My renter sent me a message like, oh, I sent basically like 3/4 of the rent. I'll send the rest later this week. It's okay. They're 10 days late on the rent, but it's okay. She's very nice people, actually. I know a lot of people that have a lot of rental property, and they told me that that's common. Still doesn't make it any better. Yeah. I'd like to go into some of the really deep mysteries. You think after a book, and the 4th edition will be out when I actually have time, and all the material for the 4th edition, Uncovering the Missing Secrets of Magnetism, totals at 5.2 gigabytes. That's just the material that I want to draw from as a reference. Of course, the discovery of what magnetism is completely mine, and I'm quite proud of that fact. First human being to totally figure out what magnetism is, how it works, why it works. And this is the deeper secrets of same. And what's just totally mind-blowing to me is that I come up with 1,000 different analogies to explain what magnetism is using everyday analogies. There's more elbow room here too. I don't feel so blocked in with that giant screen. Tell me if you don't like it. I didn't start the lava lamp up soon enough. That's completely my deficiency. All these new analogies to explain it, and yet it's just so simple. I have a couple silver chains here that I'm going to include. I only made one of these. This is the cordage. It's called the micro neck wallet. It's made out of an alligator elbow. It actually folds the same place it originally folds. You can hold like 6 to 8 cards, and it actually has a cash slot. And it's for hanging around your neck underneath your shirt, and this is adjustable. But I'm going to include, if anybody's interested, I only have one of these. Took a long time to make, actually. Nearly 3 hours. Just send me an email if you're interested. But in addition to this cordage, I'll send one of 2 different sizes of Italian. This sounds like a home shopping network. One of these silver chains, one of them is 20 inches and the other one is 28 inches. Like whichever size that you choose, I'll actually include to go with this. That way, instead of this cordage, you could have something that's like, super fancy, which is genuine alligator, and it's super tough, and a silver chain to wear around the neck. This is my own design. People found it really popular. But why magnetism? Before getting on to the super deep secrets of magnetism here, and the answer is that 100% of the air that makes up all atoms in the entire universe, the entire volume of the universe, and the universe, of course, is holographic, undeniably so, is due to one thing and one thing only. That is magnetism. 100% of the universe. So answering that riddle is absolutely primary. And it all ties in perfectly, which is so beautiful. I can never talk about it and flap my lips and explain it and get you to see the simplicity of everything. But the center must hold. It means you can't have this over here and that over there. It's utterly impossible. The universe can't work that way. Simplicity is divinity. Everything ties in perfectly. This conjugate geometry of the universe, the yin and the yang of the universe, the principle and the attribute, light and illumination, first two digits of the Fibonacci sequence, which are 1 and 1. First one's the principle, second one's the attribute. Magnetism and the dielectric. And the golden ratio, everything that's beautiful in nature, is a harmony of the one. Doesn't matter where I slide this. This is always 1 and this is always phi. Phi, or what you call the golden ratio, or beauty in nature, is a multiplicative mirage. You could say holographic mirage, take your pick, of the one. Over here we have the first one, and over here we have the second one. The Greeks called this the demiurge, or the euristos dias. Goes by a lot of different names. But everything is very simple. And magnetism, since it makes up the volume of the universe, is that phi multiplicative, or the attribute of the one. Just as illumination is equal to the magnetic, as the first light is equal to the dielectric. So the great mystery is like, why did you want to truly understand magnetism? And the answer is because it's the secret linchpin of the entire universe, and since the center must hold, and that is 100% undeniable. There's nobody on this earth, no matter how well renowned they are, how many PhDs they have, they can deny that fact. The center must hold. But there's no model of the universe posited by anybody out there, excluding myself, where everything is unified. Everything. In other words, everything is pointing towards a unified center. You can't have this over here and that over there. It's utterly impossible, and that's not my opinion. That's an undeniable, set-in-stone fact, straight from the lips of Mother Nature herself. This is how much, and I'll get to the very deep secrets immediately here, but I like to quote you this. This is how well educated these so-called experts are. This is a position, their quote, not mine, of GR and QM, quantum mechanics and general relativity. This is them. You could go look this quote up. This is what they'll tell you what magnetism is, and since the entire universe is based on magnetism, it's kind of important. That's not my opinion, that's a fact. The magnetic field between magnetic dipoles, or poles of a magnet, is caused by the exchange of virtual photons. These are not the inputs or outputs of any experiment ever done. They don't exist except on paper and in the imaginations of people that are akin to the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. They're telling you that's what's happening. They think a magnet is emitting something, and a magnet's not emitting anything. They will tell you that. You take any magnet here, it's emitting virtual photons. Look at that. I know you can't see them, but they're really there. Well, how do you know that, since they're not the input or output of any experiment ever done, Mr. Professor? Well, we've done complicated math that's beyond your understanding, and it says they are. I'm going to get this too close to my microphone. Might cause a problem. Oh! Oh my God, those snap together there. This is why every time you put a magnet back, and you know there's other magnets nearby, you need to look. But since I'm thinking about 10 things at once and doing this video, I didn't look. I'll edit that out of this video. No, I won't. So I should have looked. That is something I failed on. I'll separate those out later. You can actually separate them using a wooden wedge. So here's another quote from these geniuses, by the way, and I'll very quickly get into the deep secrets immediately here. Well, this is from Leonard Susskind, the professor of theoretical physics and the genuine priest of quantum mechanics. This is the guy everybody looks up to, kind of like the Pope. You know, the Pope's version of theoretical physics. This is his quote. When common sense and intuition fail, we, the relativists, and people of QM, quantum mechanics, had to create a new form of intuition based upon abstract mathematics. He means unreality, kind of like virtual photons are. When common sense fails, we must create an uncommon sense. Uncommon sense, by the way, would be synonymous with ignorance. So that's a direct quote from him. Now we actually have to use retroduction here and determine some things very, very easily. A magnet is not emitting anything. And if a magnet is not emitting anything, and it's not then the ether is. Not is as in objectively. You know, look, there's the ether. A lot of people, by the way, are confused and they think ether and space are the same thing. They're absolutely not the same thing. The ether, space is actually the inverse of the ether. It's the shadow of the ether. I've mentioned this a million different times. This is the impotency of the ether, space. And since the ether is, and I use the term is, you know, in a roundabout fashion, then relativity in QM is bunk, exactly like Russell and Tesla and Dollard and others have said. If the ether is, then the idea of curved space-time, which I've said a million times, is complete and total bunk. This is the same thing Tesla said. The only thing Tesla really rails against vehemently, and I've got the quotes, I've posted them up before, is the idea that space was something, and you could bend space and all this other nonsense that relativity posits, because relativity and quantum, as I accurately call them, these are the religion of bumping particles. That's what they think is happening. And when you deny the ether, you have to create a new substrate, and that, of course, is the idea of space and time being something, but space is a shadow of the ether, and time is only a measure. Neither one of these things are things. By the way, space has no capacitance. You know, if you want to understand something really simply, regardless of whether you agree with me or not, and what I've said is 100% accurate and undeniable, and it makes the center hold, is that space has no capacitance. None. Nothing pops out of space. Something will pop out of the ether when it's disturbed in the case of a generator. Same is true, of course, that nothing emits light. Tesla said this as well. But a magnet is not emitting anything, and that being the case, then this means that what's happening around a magnet is an ether perturbation modality that we call the magnetic field. A magnet definitionally, of course, is a point source object. The one thing that is surprisingly simple and yet confuses people when I talk about it is the fact that a magnet is a qualitative object, it's not a quantitative object. It's going to be kind of hard to get these separated later, but I know how to do it. You have to put them against a table, and you actually have to press really hard, and these are really powerful magnets. But before these become a magnet, they're 100% quantitatively identical. The only thing that actually changes is the quality. They are now point source objects. Now that they're point source objects, we call them magnets. What is a magnet? What makes up a magnet? Well, you know, they have a magnetic field around them. Well, yes and no. Before they actually become so-called magnets, the magnetic field around them is no different. It's that they're unorganized. They're not a point source object. So what's changed is, of course, the quality. The magnets are churning up the ether. This, for the center to hold, everything has to be super simple. Just like a generator is churning up an ether, of course, the generator doesn't generate anything. It actually churns up the ether with respect to time. You have a temporal variable, and you're turning up the ether, and you're creating an electric field that is actually drawn out against lines, power lines. But a magnet is a net zero pressure churning. I'm going to make a simple analogy between a magnetic field churning up the ether and a generator churning up an ether. The generator is like a motorboat propeller in the water. It's moving against the pressure of the water with respect to time, and it's actually pulsing the ether, and it's making rise the waves or the disturbance, not necessarily like if it's a deep propeller, it's not making waves. The boat will make waves, but it's churning up you know, the water, disturbing the water, and which of course is propelling the craft forward. We could do it reverse if we actually consider the water to be the ether, and we're actually driving, you know, the engine from inside, which of course we are with diesel fuel or whatever. We're churning up, we're creating a circuit of energy in the water, which would be analogous to the ether. And a magnet is churning up a whirlpool in the water also. A double one, technically. It's a double sink, but it's not making any waves of energy rise up out of the water, and it's not being moved with respect to time. However, there is a temporal variable between the two, but the pressures are equalized. So you have +1 on one side, not literally, and -1 on the other pole. And the magnetic disparity between the north and the south pole due to geomagnetic precession, which I'll explain here very simply, is equally pressurized, so there's no power that's actually generated from a single magnet, even though there is a temporal disparity ratio between 1 and 5 between the North Pole and the South Pole of a magnet. But even then, a magnet doesn't have poles, and this gets into incommensurability, but that's a matter for another video to explain. The same pulsing toroidal field around a longitudinal circuit of light is exactly the same around the magnet. A light is just a blinking torus. I've got the torus held sideways here. It blinks in and out of existence. Look, I said a million times too, and this is called a toroflux. It's basically a toroidal slinky, which is kind of a neat demonstration, that gives people a visual representation. Magnetism is the dielectric field. Look, there's the dielectric. Oh, there's nothing there. Exactly right. It's the same thing you actually see underneath the ferrocell. You have that hole right in the center of the magnetic field, right there. And everywhere you see the light around it, of course, is the toroidal slinky. Look, there's the dielectric. Nothing there. No, it's not a thing. It's not nothing. And look, here's the same thing. Now we have volume, creation of space. The after effect, or the gas, if you will, of this three-dimensional S-curve in full extrapolation, which is a toroidal magnetic field, is the thing we call space. I mean, that's the volume inside this torus. Look, there's the magnetic and there's the dielectric. I'm using one thing to demonstrate two things. They're both exactly the same thing. Look, here's rest energy and here's the dissipation of energy. Rest energy and there's the dissipation of energy. The magnetic field. By the way, this is the most important diagram in the universe. It's from Charles Proteus Steinmetz's book. It's in several of his books. It's right there. You could turn it 90 degrees clockwise, it'd be the same thing. You actually have the hyperboloid and the torus, which are the conjugate representations of one another. Wherever you know where the magnetic field is, you could determine where the dielectric is, and also, too, vice versa. We could show that diagram to aliens, and they would at least know that they're slightly smarter than chimps. It's like, wow, the human beings at least know what the conjugate geometry of the entire universe is. Look, they're showing us that diagram. That's the most important field diagram that there is. But the engine of the magnetic field, and human beings are children, is that black spot in the middle. Human beings are amazed not by this. Well, there's nothing there. That's not exciting. Everybody's amazed by the puppet. They're not amazed by the puppeteer or the puppet master, which is this. Human beings, unfortunately, are like children. Why is it, you know, the bald, tattooed monkey here is the first person on Earth to fully figure out what magnetism is, how it works, why it works? That magnetism is like analogous talking about ice with respect to water. We both know ice and water are the same thing. Well, magnetism and dielectricity are also, too, both the exact same thing. This is the puppet show. Human beings are children. We think a magnet's emitting a magnetic field. A magnet is not emitting a magnetic field. What people also, too, don't understand, I've received countless emails about this, is that a more powerful magnet has a smaller magnetic field around it. The more powerful magnet, and that same image underneath the supercell is of a really powerful magnet, an N55 Gauss. It's got a big black spot right in the middle. What has a smaller magnetic field around it? Now, as I've said, and people kind of understood this, is that the water coming out of the shower head would be magnetism. Not literally, but the same water going down the drain would be the dielectric. In the case of the magnet, the hidden drain that you can't see, you know it's somewhere at the bottom of the drain and the bottom of the bathtub, is the nexus or the engine that drives all of it. But if you increase the pressure from the shower head by turning it up, there's that Seinfeld episode where they buy high pressure shower heads. I don't know if you remember that one. In the case of our magnet, the water would start getting pulled away from the shower head, and it would start flowing back towards the drain. When you increase the pressure of one, since magnetism is the after effect of the dielectric, since it's that loss of energy, when you dial up the power, what you're really dialing up the power of is not really the magnetic, but the dielectric. If you're able to dial up a magnet infinitely, which we can do, it would blink out of existence. The dielectric would completely consume the physical object we call the magnet, and it would vanish down a hole. We'd have a miniature black hole, or what human beings call a black hole. That's the actual engine at the center, of course, of the magnetic field, that black spot in the middle of the puppet show. Anything spinning in space suffers lag. This is why there's precession. The flywheel of mass and the flywheel of fields makes absolutely no difference. Since mass itself is super high energy light, the distinction as per fields between the magnetic field and that of mass, like the spinning brass flywheel, is non-existent. So that's lag. Anything that has mass that's spinning in space. Now, ether is not the space. Everybody thinks, well, yeah, space is the ether and vice versa. That's not the case. Space, I mean, ether is everywhere and nowhere. You can't point to it. It's non-Cartesian pure potential. You take an XYZ axis, the center intersection of the XYZ axis, which is no Cartesian coordinate and it has no mass, is the ether itself, non-Cartesian pure potential. When you spin a mass and same, you're churning up the ether. Well, anything that's churning up the ether creates lag. And if everything is working in unison, and this whole flywheel is working in unison, you have lag or precession, geomagnetic precession. Watch it start to precess. It'll precess more and more and more and more. This entire brass flywheel is working in unison. The entire magnetic field of a magnet, which is qualitative, not quantitative, is working in unison. As such, it has something called low frequency geomagnetic precession, but it's nothing other than gyroscopic precession. The Earth precesses because the Earth is spinning in unison. The entire mass is spinning in unison, just like this brass flywheel is spinning in unison. Start to precess more and more and more. And then, by the way, this is why there's magnetic flip of polarity. This example is as simple as it gets. It's like, why do mag poles flip? Why does a gyroscope flip? Gyroscope, I said gyroscope. Excuse me about that. Why is there lag or disparity between the North Pole and the South Pole? Simple. Doesn't matter if it's a field or a brass flywheel or a giant spherical mass of dirt and rock and magma, etc., etc., etc. It's the same thing. The ether is everywhere and nowhere. It has no Cartesian value. Anything spinning in same, especially a point source, where everything, point source is a fancy way of saying everything working in unison. When everything's working in unison and is powerful, you'll have this precessional lag. That lag is called geomagnetic precession. So, anything spinning in space is churning up the ether, and this lag is necessitated. In other words, it can't exist any other way. The same thing we call magnetic attraction, and the same thing we call gravity, and the same thing we call electrostatic cling. When you pull your socks out of the dryer where they're stuck together and it's, it's low humidity, those are all anti-spatial vectors. They're going for or vying for the erasure of space. Stick these two magnets between my hand here. There we go. They're kind of tightly squeezing my hand. Yeah. They're trying to erase space. All point source objects are polarized. All of them. All polarization or point source fields are very powerful. The ether gets disturbed by point source fields because they're not additive, they're multiplicative. You don't have 2 plus 2 plus 2. You have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Things very, very, very quickly add up to disturbing the ether. And by the way, the very simple explanation of a point source field is that it very easily punctures the ether to disturb same. Before those became magnets, they're not impressive at all. They're just ceramic lumps of neodymium iron boron. There's nothing impressive about them. You couldn't impress a single person on this earth with those up until right before they were electrified and all the intervening gyroscopes of the magnetic fields making up the atoms of those ceramic magnets were brought into alignment. It's putting all your ducks in a row. That's what creating a magnet does. You got the same type of ducks, the same weight of ducks, the same kind of ducks. Let's just imagine atoms or ducks. Except they're all quacking in different directions before they put them in a row, and then not that you can train a duck, but if you snap your fingers and make them all line up, it's the same thing with soldiers walking across a bridge. It used to be the case that very simple wooden bridges, instead of soldiers marching in step, which create a harmonic disturbance on the bridge, they would give the soldiers orders to walk out of step. I forget the name of the order. That way when they cross the bridge, they wouldn't cause it to collapse. So you're not working as a point source unison, which is creating a disturbance, in this case, bringing down a bridge. This is the same as gravity, the same as electrostatics. Human beings are so unintellectually, I just said unintellectually, I'll edit that out. Intellectually unevolved, sorry about that, that's what happens when you think 10 times, about 10 different things at once. We'll say, what is a magnet? There's a magnetic field around it, it's emitting magnetism, which it's not. So when these two magnets are accelerating towards one another, therefore that's magnetic attraction. Well, that's correct observation with an incorrect conclusion. There's no such thing as magnetic attraction. Nothing is emitting magnetism. Nothing. The only way people came to believe that is due to atomism. The only way. Atomism, step number one of atomism is the disbelief and the complete ignoring of the ether. Well, when you erase the ether, you got to replace it with something. Well, they did. They replaced it with something that's completely absurd, which is bumping particles. Magnets emitting virtual photons. Like, really? Where did you get that idea? Well, you know, it doesn't make any sense, but the math says it's real. Magnet's not emitting anything. That interesting, powerful field around a magnet is due to that non-Cartesian pure potential. You're disturbing the ether. You're creating a whirlpool on either side of the ether because a magnet is a point source object. That's not my opinion. That's a hard, cold fact. And I'm the first person in the world to say that. I've been saying it for years. Magnet's a point source object, like a magnifying glass, like a laser, like a parabolic dish. It takes an enormous amount of something, in this case a signal, and it brings it to a point for greatly increased gain. Parabolic dishes for listening to audio at distance. You ever seen a big parabolic dish? You could point it at wildlife and you could hear bird songs in a far distance. Same is true of antenna technology. All of that is about taking a bunch of stuff out here and focusing it to a point. And that's all a magnet is. Qualitative objects, not quantitative. That's not my opinion either. That's a fact. All of this is super simple. All of it. And this is the way the universe works. And I'm proud of the fact that I'm the first person on Earth to discover this fact. Nikola Tesla said, all literature on this subject, i.e. relativity and curved space-time, is futile and destined to oblivion. I hope I explained the deeper secrets of magnetism, because it really is very, very simple. If you ever like these videos, any donations always warmly welcome. If you're interested in my alligator micro neck wallet, which you could hang it anywhere, like you put it underneath your shirt, you know, just send me an email. I've only got one. And it comes with a silver chain, too. I will include whichever length of silver chain you want. And I'll make it super fancy. So you have an alligator neck wallet and a silver chain. Send me an email if you have any questions. And I'll check you out on live stream. I'm going to use the same computer for live stream. Let me know what you think about my new little computer here, because that other one was driving me nuts because it was so slow. Lux e veritas. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. And goodbye. Now I gotta undo those two magnets.